My name is Janet, and at 32, I thought I knew what family loyalty meant. As a successful real estate agent here in Denver, I'd always been the responsible older sister, the one who stepped up when our parents died in that terrible car accident 5 years ago. I was so excited to co-sign the mortgage for my younger brother Dennis and his fiancée Brenda, because I believed in them, wanted to help them start their new life together in that beautiful 3-bedroom house they'd found in the suburbs. I trusted Dennis completely, and I thought Brenda was just stressed about wedding planning. But sometimes the people closest to you can shatter your world in ways you never imagined possible. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to share will show you how quickly everything you believe about family can change forever. Growing up, Dennis and I were inseparable. He was only 3 years younger, but after Mom and Dad died in that head-on collision with a drunk driver, I became more than just his big sister. I became his anchor. At 26, I was already established in real estate, working 14-hour days to build my client base and reputation. Dennis was 23, charming and easygoing, the kind of guy who could walk into any room and make everyone laugh within 5 minutes. Our parents had been working-class people who taught us the value of hard work and taking care of each other. Dad worked construction, Mom was a school secretary. They left us with a small life insurance policy and a modest house that we sold to help Dennis get started in construction work. I used my connections to get him hired with a reputable company, and he thrived there. Dennis had natural leadership skills and quickly worked his way up to foreman. But Dennis also had a tendency to make impulsive decisions, especially when it came to relationships. He'd fall hard and fast, then get his heart broken when things didn't work out. I'd seen him through 3 serious relationships over the years, always there with tissues, ice cream, and advice when they ended badly. So when he started dating Brenda 8 months ago, I was cautiously optimistic but watchful. Brenda seemed sweet at first. She was 27, petite with blonde hair and big blue eyes that could look incredibly innocent. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office when they first started dating, and Dennis would light up whenever he talked about her. They moved in together after just 4 months, which worried me. But Dennis insisted he'd found the one. The first red flag appeared during a family barbecue at my house. Dennis had grilled burgers, and I'd made my famous potato salad. Everything was going well until I casually mentioned that the potato salad recipe came from our mother. Brenda's entire demeanor changed. She pushed her plate away and snapped that she didn't like old-fashioned food, and why couldn't we just order pizza like normal people? When Dennis gently suggested she try it, she stormed off to the bathroom and didn't come out for 20 minutes. When she returned, her eyes were red from crying, and Dennis spent the rest of the evening apologizing to her. I noticed other troubling patterns too. Brenda had quit her receptionist job after 2 months of dating Dennis, claiming her boss was sexually harassing her, though she never provided details or filed a complaint. She claimed to be looking for work, but spent most days shopping or getting her nails done. When Dennis worked overtime to cover their expenses, she'd accuse him of choosing work over her and threaten to leave. But Dennis seemed genuinely happy, and I didn't want to be the interfering sister who ruined his relationship. I kept my concerns to myself and tried to be supportive. When they started talking about buying a house together, I was surprised by how quickly things were moving, but Dennis was 31 and capable of making his own decisions. The mortgage situation came up during a Sunday dinner at my place in early March. Dennis explained that they'd found the perfect house, a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in Lakewood with a big backyard and updated kitchen. The asking price was $350,000, which was reasonable for the area. The problem was that Brenda still didn't have a job, and Dennis's income as a construction foreman, while decent, wasn't quite enough to qualify for the full loan amount on his own. "Janet, I know this is a huge favor to ask," Dennis said, looking nervous, "but would you consider co-signing our mortgage? Your credit score is amazing, and with your real estate income added to mine, we'd easily qualify. I promise we'll never miss a payment. This house is our dream, and Brenda's already planning where to put the Christmas tree." I looked at Brenda, who was uncharacteristically quiet, picking at her salad. Something felt off about her silence, but Dennis looked so hopeful, so excited about this next step in his life. And honestly, I was excited for him too. After everything we'd been through, seeing him happy and planning a future made my heart full. "Of course," I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "Family helps family. Let's make this happen." The mortgage process began in mid-March, and almost immediately, I started seeing sides of Brenda I'd never witnessed before. Our first meeting with the loan officer, Sarah Martinez, at First National Bank, should have been straightforward. We were pre-approved based on the preliminary application, and we just needed to review terms and submit final documentation. Brenda arrived 20 minutes late, claiming she'd gotten lost even though the bank was only 10 minutes from their apartment. She was dressed inappropriately for a business meeting, wearing a crop top and ripped jeans, and seemed agitated from the moment she sat down. When Sarah began explaining the mortgage terms, Brenda interrupted constantly with unreasonable demands. "Why is the interest rate so high?" she snapped, even though Sarah had just explained it was actually below market rate. "My friend's cousin got a better rate last year." "Ma'am, interest rates have changed significantly in the past year," Sarah explained patiently. "Your rate is actually quite competitive given current market conditions." "I don't care about market conditions," Brenda shot back. "I want the same rate my friend's cousin got." I tried to smooth things over, explaining that the rate was indeed excellent, but Brenda turned her anger on me. "Easy for you to say, Janet. You're not the one who'll be paying it for 30 years. Dennis looked embarrassed and tried to calm Brenda down, but she was just getting started. When Sarah mentioned that as co-borrowers, both Dennis and Brenda would be responsible for the mortgage payments, Brenda exploded. "I'm not working right now because I'm planning our wedding and looking for the right career opportunity," she announced loudly, causing other customers in the bank to stare. "Dennis makes plenty of money to cover the payments. That's what husbands are for." Sarah and I exchanged glances. This wasn't going well. After the meeting, which should have taken 30 minutes but stretched to nearly 2 hours because of Brenda's outbursts, Dennis apologized profusely. "She's just stressed about the wedding," he said, for what felt like the 100th time. "Planning a wedding and buying a house at the same time is overwhelming." But the pattern continued throughout the house hunting process. Brenda rejected perfectly good houses for ridiculous reasons. One had ugly kitchen cabinets that could easily be painted. Another had a bathroom that was too small, even though it was actually quite spacious. A third had bad energy because the previous owners had gotten divorced. When we finally found the house they wanted, a beautiful colonial on Maple Street, Brenda's demands became even more unreasonable. She insisted that any offer include the sellers paying for new appliances, fresh paint throughout, and professional carpet cleaning. When I gently suggested that such demands might make their offer less competitive in a tight market, she accused me of trying to sabotage their chances. "Maybe Janet doesn't want us to get this house," she said to Dennis right in front of me. "Maybe she likes having you dependent on her." The comment stung, especially because I'd been nothing but supportive. Dennis quickly assured her that wasn't the case, but he didn't defend me either, which hurt even more. Things got worse during the home inspection. The inspector found minor issues that were completely normal for a house built in 1995. Some caulking that needed refreshing, a few loose floorboards, and one electrical outlet that wasn't grounded properly. The total cost to address everything was maybe $800. But Brenda acted like the house was falling down. "I'm not living in a death trap," she declared dramatically. "These sellers are trying to dump their problems on us." She demanded that the sellers fix everything at their expense and also reduce the purchase price by $5,000 for her inconvenience and stress. When I pointed out that this was unreasonable and might kill the deal, Brenda turned nasty. "You know what, Janet? This is our house, not yours. Maybe you should let us handle our own business instead of trying to control everything." Dennis was caught in the middle, obviously uncomfortable but unwilling to stand up to Brenda. "Babe, Janet's just trying to help," he said weakly. "Help?" Brenda's voice got shrill. "She's trying to control our entire life. First she inserts herself into our mortgage. Now she's making decisions about our house. What's next? Is she going to plan our wedding too?" I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. I was doing them a massive favor by co-signing their mortgage, putting my own credit and financial stability on the line, and this was how she treated me? But I bit my tongue because I could see how distressed Dennis looked. The real estate agent, Mike Thompson, managed to negotiate a compromise where the sellers would handle the electrical issue and split the cost of the other repairs. But Brenda wasn't satisfied. She spent the entire drive home complaining that Dennis and I had ganged up on her and forced her to accept a bad deal. As we got closer to closing, Brenda's behavior escalated further. She started calling me at all hours with questions and demands about the mortgage process. If I didn't answer immediately, she'd leave angry voicemails, accusing me of not caring about their future. She showed up unannounced at my real estate office twice in 1 week, both times causing scenes in front of my clients. The first time, She barged in while I was showing house listings to a young couple looking to buy their first home. "Janet, I need to talk to you right now about the mortgage," she announced, completely ignoring my clients. "Brenda, I'm with clients," I said as politely as possible. "Can we discuss this later?" "No, we can't discuss it later," she snapped. "The bank wants more documentation, and I don't understand why this is so complicated. You're supposed to be helping us." My clients looked uncomfortable and confused. I had to excuse myself and spend 15 minutes dealing with Brenda's questions, which could have easily been handled with a phone call later. When I returned, my clients had decided to think about it and left. I lost that sale because of Brenda's selfishness. The second incident was even worse. She arrived while I was in a closing meeting with another client, an elderly woman selling her family home. Brenda actually tried to interrupt the closing to demand my attention. When my assistant explained I was unavailable, Brenda accused her of lying and tried to push past her into the conference room. "This is ridiculous," Brenda shouted loud enough for everyone in the office to hear. "I'm going to be Janet's sister-in-law. I should be her priority, not some random stranger." Security had to escort her out, and I was mortified. My reputation in real estate depended on professionalism and discretion. Having my brother's fiancée cause public scenes at my workplace was damaging to my career, but when I tried to discuss this with Dennis, he just made more excuses. "She's under a lot of pressure," he said. "The wedding's in 6 months, we're buying a house, and she doesn't have family support like we do. Can't you just be patient with her?" I was trying to be patient, but Brenda was making it increasingly difficult. The final straw came just 1 week before closing, when she discovered something that sent her into a complete rage. On a Tuesday morning in late April, I was reviewing the final closing documents when my phone rang. It was Brenda, and she was already screaming before I could even say hello. "You conniving witch," she shrieked into the phone. "I found out what you're really doing. You think you're so smart, don't you?" "Brenda, what are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong? What's wrong is that you've been lying to us this whole time. I know about the guarantor rights. I know that you can force us to sell our house if you want to. You're trying to own our house and control our marriage." My stomach dropped. Brenda had apparently done some research and discovered that as the guarantor on their mortgage, I would have certain legal rights to the property. If Dennis and Brenda defaulted on payments, I could potentially petition the court to force a sale to recover my losses. It was a standard legal protection for guarantors, but I'd never planned to use it. I was only helping them buy the house, not trying to control it. "Brenda, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Those rights are just legal protections in case something goes wrong. I would never use them unless you stopped making payments and left me responsible for the mortgage. I'm doing this to help you, not control you." "Liar," she spat. "You've been planning this from the beginning. You can't stand that Dennis is happy with me, so you found a way to own our house and break us up. Well, I'm not going to let that happen." She hung up on me, and I sat there staring at my phone in disbelief. How had trying to help my brother turned into this nightmare? I immediately called Dennis to explain what had happened and to clarify the legal situation. "Dennis, Brenda called me screaming about guarantor rights," I said when he answered. "I need you to understand that these are standard protections. I'm not trying to control your house or your marriage. I'm trying to help you." But Dennis's response chilled me to the bone. His voice was cold and distant, nothing like the warm, grateful brother who'd asked for my help just 2 months earlier. "Janet, Brenda's really upset about this," he said. "She feels like you've been manipulating us, and honestly, I'm starting to see her point. Why didn't you tell us about these rights before?" "Because they're not relevant unless you default on the loan," I explained, feeling desperate. "Dennis, you're my brother. I would never do anything to hurt you. I'm risking my own credit and financial security to help you buy this house." "Maybe that's the problem," he said quietly. "Maybe we shouldn't have asked you to get involved. Brenda thinks we should find another way to finance the house." "Dennis, you close in 6 days," I said. "There's no time to get new financing. And even if there was, no lender is going to approve you without Brenda having income." "Then maybe Brenda needs to get a job," he said, sounding frustrated. For a moment, I thought he was finally seeing the situation clearly. But then he continued, and my heart sank. "But that's not the point right now. The point is that Brenda doesn't trust you anymore, and I need to support my fiancée. She wants you to sign additional paperwork removing your guarantor rights while keeping your financial obligations." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dennis, that's insane. I'd be responsible for paying your mortgage if you defaulted, but I'd have no legal recourse to protect myself. No lawyer would ever advise someone to sign an agreement like that. So you won't do it? He asked. I can't do it, I said. It would be financial suicide. And, frankly, I'm hurt that you'd even ask me to put myself in that position, after everything I've done to help you. Well, Brenda's threatening to call off the wedding if you don't, he said. She says she can't marry someone whose sister is trying to control their life. The manipulation was so obvious, but Dennis couldn't or wouldn't see it. Brenda was using the wedding as leverage to get what she wanted, and my brother was falling for it completely. Over the next few days, the pressure intensified. Dennis called multiple times asking me to reconsider. Brenda left voicemails that alternated between fake sweetness and outright hostility. In one message, she actually cried and claimed she was so scared that I was going to steal their house. In another, she called me a jealous old maid who was obsessed with controlling Dennis. But the worst part was when Brenda started calling my real estate clients directly. She'd somehow gotten hold of my client list and began making calls, claiming there were serious questions about my professional ethics and judgment. She told one client that I was involved in shady financial dealings with my own family and suggested they might want to find another agent. I was livid. Attacking me personally was one thing, but threatening my livelihood crossed every line. When I confronted Dennis about it, he was defensive. Brenda's just scared and upset, he said. Maybe she went too far, but you have to understand her perspective. Her perspective? I said, my voice rising. Dennis, she's calling my clients and lying about me. She could destroy my career. How is that acceptable? Look, I'll talk to her about the client calls, he said. But Janet, you have to meet us halfway here. Can't you just sign the paperwork? We promise we'll never default. You'll never need those rights. If you'll never default, then why does it matter if I keep the legal protections? I asked. He didn't have an answer for that. 3 days before closing, I made a decision. I needed to have a direct conversation with Brenda, woman to woman, without Dennis in the middle. Maybe if I could explain my position calmly and rationally, we could find a solution that worked for everyone. I called Dennis and suggested we all meet at the house to walk through it one final time and discuss our concerns openly. That's a great idea, Dennis said, sounding relieved. I think once you two really talk, you'll realize you're on the same side. I hoped he was right, but I had a bad feeling about what was coming. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at the house on Maple Street. I arrived first, using the lockbox code the real estate agent had provided. The house really was beautiful, with hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. Standing in the empty living room, I felt sad that this whole situation had become so complicated. All I'd wanted was to help my brother achieve his dream of homeownership. Dennis arrived 10 minutes later, looking tired and stressed. He'd been working long hours on a construction project, and the tension at home was clearly wearing on him. Thanks for doing this, Janet, he said, giving me a quick hug. I really think if you and Brenda can just talk without all the emotion, you'll work this out. I hope so, I said. Dennis, I want you to know that I've never wanted anything but happiness for you. If there's a way to resolve this that protects everyone, I'm open to it. I know, he said. And I appreciate everything you've done for us, I really do. Brenda arrived 15 minutes late, which was typical for her. She was dressed nicely in a floral dress and had clearly spent time on her hair and makeup. When she walked in, she actually smiled at me, which was the first time in weeks. Hi, Janet, she said in a sweet voice. Thank you for meeting us here. I'm really glad we can finally clear the air. Her whole demeanor was different, almost apologetic. I felt a wave of relief. Maybe Dennis was right. Maybe we could work this out after all. I'm glad too, I said. Brenda, I want you to know that I'm not trying to control you or Dennis. I just want to help you get this house and start your life together. I know, she said, nodding earnestly. I think I've been so stressed about the wedding and everything that I overreacted. I'm sorry for some of the things I said. We spent a few minutes walking through the house together, discussing paint colors and furniture placement. The conversation was pleasant and normal, nothing like the hostile interactions we'd been having. I started to relax, thinking maybe we'd turned a corner. Then Dennis's phone rang. It was his construction supervisor with an emergency at the job site. A delivery truck had damaged part of the foundation they'd poured the day before, and Dennis needed to get there immediately to assess the situation and coordinate repairs. I'm so sorry, he said, grabbing his keys. This could cost us the whole project if we don't handle it right away. Can you two continue the conversation without me? I think you're making real progress. I felt a flicker of unease. Something about being alone with Brenda made me nervous. especially given her unpredictable behavior over the past few weeks. But she seemed genuinely contrite, and I didn't want to derail the progress we'd made. Sure, I said. We'll be fine. Dennis kissed Brenda goodbye and headed for the door. I'll be back as soon as I can, he called over his shoulder. For the first few minutes after he left, everything continued to go well. Brenda and I discussed the logistics of the closing, which was scheduled for the following Tuesday. She thanked me again for co-signing the mortgage and acknowledged that she understood I was taking a financial risk to help them. I really am grateful, Janet, she said as we stood in the kitchen. I know I haven't shown it well, but this house means everything to me. Growing up, my family moved around a lot, and I never had a real home. This feels like my chance to finally have roots, you know? It was the most vulnerable and honest she'd ever been with me, and I felt my heart soften toward her. I understand completely, I said, and I want you to have that. That's why I'm willing to help. That's what makes this so hard, she said, her voice getting quieter. I do appreciate your help, but I need to know that this is really our house, mine and Dennis's. I need to know that you won't have power over our home. Here we were, back to the guarantor rights issue. But her tone was still reasonable, so I tried to explain my position one more time. Brenda, I understand your concern, but those rights are just insurance for me. If you and Dennis make your payments, which I know you will, I'll never need to use them. But if I give up those protections and something goes wrong, I could lose everything I've worked for. Her expression began to change, the sweetness fading from her face. But you just said you know we'll make our payments. So why do you need the rights? Because that's how guarantor agreements work, I said, trying to stay patient. It's not personal, it's just legal protection. No one would ever co-sign a loan without some recourse if things go wrong. Other people do it all the time, she said, her voice getting harder. My friend's mom co-signed her car loan with no special rights. A car loan is very different from a mortgage, I explained. We're talking about $350,000, not $25,000. So you don't trust us, she said flatly. It's not about trust, it's about being financially responsible, I said, feeling the conversation slipping away from me again. It is about trust, she said, her voice rising. You don't trust Dennis and me to pay our mortgage. You think we're going to default and stick you with the bill? Brenda, that's not what I said, I protested. I'm just trying to protect myself legally, which is completely normal and reasonable. But she was getting agitated again, pacing around the kitchen. You know what I think, Janet? I think you can't stand that Dennis is getting married and moving on with his life. I think you want to keep him dependent on you forever. That's ridiculous, I said, feeling my own temper starting to rise. I've been nothing but supportive of your relationship. Supportive? She laughed bitterly. You've been interfering from day one. Making little comments, giving your opinions about everything, acting like you know what's best for Dennis. I've been trying to help you buy a house, I said, my voice getting louder. At considerable risk to myself, I might add. And there it is, she said triumphantly. You think we owe you something. You think because you're co-signing our mortgage, you get to have a say in our lives forever. The conversation was spiraling out of control again, just like every other interaction we'd had recently. But this time felt different, more intense. Brenda's eyes had a wild look that made me genuinely uncomfortable. I think I should go, I said, moving toward the front door. We can discuss this more when Dennis gets back. But Brenda stepped in front of me, blocking my path. No, we're going to settle this right now, she said. I'm sick of your games and manipulation. You're going to sign those papers removing your rights, or you're going to withdraw from the mortgage completely. Brenda, move aside, I said firmly. I'm leaving. You're not leaving until we resolve this, she said, crossing her arms. I'm not going to let you ruin my life. I tried to step around her, but she moved to block me again. The situation was escalating quickly, and I was starting to feel trapped. Brenda, you're being unreasonable. Let me pass. Unreasonable? She screamed, her calm facade completely gone now. You want to know what's unreasonable? A jealous, bitter woman who can't stand to see her brother happy. That's what's unreasonable. I'm not jealous, I said, my own anger finally boiling over. I'm trying to help you, and you're acting like a spoiled child who can't handle not getting everything exactly the way you want it. That's when she completely lost it. Don't you dare call me a child, you controlling witch, she shrieked. You think you're so much better than me because you have money and a career. Well, let me tell you something. Dennis doesn't need you anymore. He has me now. If Dennis doesn't need me, then maybe you should find another co-signer, I shot back, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. That's exactly what I'm going to do, she said, her voice deadly quiet. But first, I'm going to make sure you never interfere in our lives again. I tried to push past her toward the door, but Brenda grabbed my arm and shoved me hard against the wall. My shoulder hit the drywall with a painful thud, and I stumbled, shocked that she'd actually put her hands on me. Brenda, stop, I said, trying to steady myself. This is crazy. But she wasn't done. Her face was red with rage, and she looked completely unhinged. You think you can just walk away after trying to ruin my life? She screamed. I tried to get to the door again, but she was faster. She grabbed a decorative stone from the fireplace mantel, one of those heavy river rocks that the previous owners had left as staging. Before I could react, she swung it at my head. The stone connected with my temple, and stars exploded across my vision. I fell hard, my shoulder hitting the hardwood floor with a sickening pop that I felt as much as heard. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. But Brenda wasn't finished. As I lay there dazed and hurt, she started kicking me in the ribs, screaming obscenities that I'd never heard her use before. You ruined everything, she kept shouting between kicks. Everything. I managed to roll away from her and crawl toward my purse, where my phone was. Every movement sent waves of pain through my head and shoulder, but I knew I needed help. Brenda seemed to realize what I was doing and tried to kick the phone out of my hands, but I managed to dial 911 before she could stop me. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher asked. I've been assaulted, I gasped into the phone. I need an ambulance at 1527 Maple Street. Hearing me call for help seemed to snap Brenda back to reality. She looked down at me bleeding on the floor, then at the stone in her hand, and her face went white. Without another word, she dropped the rock and ran out of the house, leaving me alone and injured. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, followed closely by police officers. As they worked to stabilize me and assess my injuries, I tried to explain what had happened, but my head was pounding so badly that I could barely think straight. Ma'am, can you tell us who did this to you? One of the officers asked as the paramedics prepared to transport me to the hospital. My brother's fiancée, I said weakly. Brenda Morrison. She hit me with a stone and then kicked me. The officer took down her information and assured me they would investigate. As the ambulance pulled away from the house that was supposed to represent Dennis and Brenda's new beginning, I couldn't help but think that this was the end of everything I'd thought I knew about family. The emergency room at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital was busy for a Thursday evening, but the triage nurse took one look at my head injury and moved me to the front of the line. Dr. Patricia Williams, a kind woman in her 40s, examined me thoroughly while asking gentle questions about what had happened. You have a moderate concussion, she explained after reviewing my CT scan results. The good news is there's no skull fracture or brain bleeding, but you're going to have headaches and dizziness for several weeks. You also have a dislocated shoulder that we need to reset, and significant bruising on your ribs. You're lucky nothing was broken. Lucky. I didn't feel very lucky lying in a hospital bed with a throbbing head and my left arm in a sling, but I supposed it could have been worse. If Brenda had hit me just a little harder, or if I'd fallen differently, I might not have survived. The police officer, Detective Maria Santos, returned while I was waiting for the discharge paperwork. She was a serious woman with kind eyes who treated me with respect and professionalism throughout the interview process. Ms. Patterson, I've taken photos of your injuries and documented your statement, she said. I want you to know that we take assault cases very seriously. Have you had any contact with Ms. Morrison since the incident? No, I said. She ran away right after I called 911. What about your brother? Have you spoken with him? That was the question I'd been dreading. In all the chaos of the ambulance ride and medical treatment, I'd been putting off the inevitable conversation with Dennis. I needed to call him and tell him what his fiancée had done to me. Not yet, I admitted. I need to call him. I'd recommend having that conversation soon, Detective Santos said. And I want you to document any communications you have with either Ms. Morrison or your brother. If there are any threats or attempts to contact you, call me immediately. She handed me her business card and left me alone with my phone. I stared at Dennis's number for a long time before finally working up the courage to call. My hands were shaking as I dialed, partly from the concussion and partly from nerves. Hey, Janet, Dennis answered on the second ring. How did the rest of the conversation go with Brenda? She's not back yet, but I figured you guys were still talking. The casual tone of his voice broke my heart. He had no idea that his fiancée had just put his sister in the hospital. "Dennis," I said, my voice still weak from the injury. "I'm at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital. Brenda attacked me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean attacked you?" he asked finally. "I mean she hit me in the head with a stone and kicked me while I was down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have a concussion and a dislocated shoulder. The police are looking for her." Another pause. When Dennis spoke again, his voice was strange, distant. "Janet, that doesn't sound like Brenda at all. Are you sure that's what happened?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dennis, I'm in the hospital. I have medical records and police reports. Of course, I'm sure that's what happened." "But what led up to it?" he asked. "Brenda's not a violent person. Something must have provoked her." "Provoked her?" I felt like I'd been slapped all over again. "Nothing provoked her, Dennis. We were having a disagreement about the mortgage, and she lost control. She physically blocked me from leaving, and then attacked me when I tried to get to the door." "I don't know, Janet," he said, and I could hear doubt in his voice. "That just doesn't sound like the Brenda I know. She's upset about the guarantor situation, but she wouldn't hurt anyone. The woman I know wouldn't assault someone either, but she did," I said, feeling frustrated and hurt. "Dennis, I'm your sister. Why would I lie about something like this?" "I'm not saying you're lying," he said quickly, "but maybe you're confused because of the head injury. Maybe it wasn't as bad as you think it was." I was speechless. My own brother was suggesting that I was confused or exaggerating about being assaulted. As we were talking, I could hear a car door slam in the background of his call. "Brenda's back," he said. "Let me talk to her and get her side of the story." "Her side of the story?" I repeated. "Dennis, there's only one side. She attacked me and left me bleeding on the floor. Look, I'll call you back after I talk to her, okay?" he said, and hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone in disbelief. This wasn't the brother I'd raised, the man I'd supported through everything. This was someone I didn't recognize, someone who was choosing his abusive fiancée over his injured sister. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Dennis, but his tone was completely different now. Cold. Accusatory. "I talked to Brenda," he said without preamble. "She told me what really happened." "What really happened is exactly what I told you," I said. "That's not what Brenda says," he replied. "She says you attacked her first. She says you grabbed her and threatened to destroy the mortgage deal if she didn't do what you wanted. She says she only defended herself when you tried to hurt her." I felt like the world was tilting around me. "Dennis, that's completely false. I never touched her until she shoved me against the wall. Brenda was crying when she got home," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "She's scared and upset. She says you threatened to ruin our lives if we didn't give you complete control over our house." "I never said anything like that," I protested. "Dennis, you know me. You've known me your whole life. When have I ever been violent or threatening?" "I've never seen you this angry about anything before," he said. "Maybe the stress of the mortgage situation has been affecting you more than you realized." I couldn't believe this was happening. Brenda had not only assaulted me, but she'd managed to convince Dennis that I was the aggressor. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. "She hit me with a stone, Dennis," I said, my voice breaking. "I have a concussion. I have photographs of my injuries. The police have physical evidence." "Brenda said she never hit you with anything," he said. "She said you fell when you tried to grab her, and that's how you got hurt." "And the stone? The one with my blood on it that the police took as evidence?" "I don't know about any stone," he said. "But Janet, I think you need to really think about whether you want to press charges. Brenda's scared that you're going to try to send her to jail over what was basically a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That's what he was calling his fiancée's violent assault on his sister. A misunderstanding. Over the next 2 days, while I was home recovering from my injuries, Dennis called several times. But instead of checking on my health or offering support, he was pressuring me to drop the charges against Brenda. "She made a mistake," he said during one call. "She's really sorry about what happened, but if you press charges, it could ruin her life. She might not be able to get a job or anything." "What about my life?" I asked. "What about the fact that she could have killed me?" "Come on, Janet, don't be so dramatic," he said. "You're fine. You're going to recover completely." "I'm fine," I said, incredulous. "Dennis, I can barely lift my left arm. I have headaches so bad I can't work. I had to cancel 3 client meetings this week because I can't drive. Those things are temporary, he said dismissively, but a criminal record would affect Brenda permanently. I realized then that Dennis had made his choice. He was choosing Brenda over me, even when she'd committed a violent crime against his own sister. The brother I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The final blow came on Saturday morning. I was sitting on my couch with an ice pack on my head when my phone buzzed with a text message from Dennis. When I read it, I felt like he'd punched me in the stomach. "Stay away from us. Brenda doesn't feel safe around you anymore, and neither do I. Don't contact us again." I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over. After everything I'd done for him, after being assaulted by his fiancée, this was how Dennis was treating me. I was the one who'd been injured, but somehow I was the threat. I typed and deleted several responses, trying to find words that could penetrate the wall of manipulation Brenda had built around my brother. But finally, I realized there was nothing I could say that would make him see the truth. Brenda had won. She'd successfully turned Dennis against me and isolated him from the one person who'd always had his back. So I sent back just one word: done. But I wasn't really done. I was just getting started. The word done sat on my phone screen for a long moment after I sent it. Such a small word to represent the end of a relationship that had defined my entire adult life. But as I sat there with my head pounding and my shoulder aching, something shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were being joined by something else. A cold, clear anger that cut through the fog of my concussion. If Dennis wanted me to stay away from them, I would honor that request completely, starting with their mortgage. I'd spent the weekend thinking about my options, and by Monday morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. My first call was to my attorney, Rebecca Martinez, who'd handled my real estate transactions for years. "Janet, I heard about what happened," she said when I reached her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I said honestly. "But I need your help with something urgent. I want to withdraw as guarantor on my brother's mortgage." There was a pause. "Are you sure about this? Once you withdraw, there's no going back. The lender will almost certainly cancel the loan, since your income was critical to the approval." "I'm absolutely sure," I said. "Rebecca, Dennis told me to stay away from them. I'm just honoring his request. If Brenda doesn't feel safe around me, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to remain financially connected to their house purchase." "I understand," she said. "Let me call First National and see what we need to do." My second call was to Detective Santos to give her an update on Dennis's reaction to the assault. "Ms. Patterson, I have to tell you, this kind of family pressure is common in domestic violence cases," she said. "The victim's family often sides with the abuser, especially when manipulation is involved. It doesn't change the facts of what happened to you." "I know," I said, "and I want to proceed with pressing charges. Brenda Morrison assaulted me, and she needs to face consequences for her actions." "Good," Detective Santos said. "We've issued a warrant for her arrest. She's been avoiding us since Thursday, but we'll find her." By Tuesday morning, the same day Dennis and Brenda were supposed to close on their dream house, everything began to unravel for them. Rebecca called me at 9 a.m. with an update. "First National has officially canceled the mortgage," she said. "Without your income and credit backing the loan, Dennis and Brenda don't qualify for the amount they need. The closing has been canceled and they'll forfeit their earnest money." "How much earnest money?" I asked. $5,000, she said. "Plus they'll be responsible for inspection costs, appraisal fees, and other expenses, probably close to $8,000 total." I felt a grim satisfaction hearing those numbers. It was an expensive lesson, but maybe it would help Dennis understand that actions have consequences. At 10:30, my phone started ringing. It was Dennis, and he sounded frantic. "Janet, what did you do?" he demanded when I answered. "The bank called and said our mortgage was canceled. They said you withdrew as guarantor. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake," I said calmly. "You told me to stay away from you and Brenda. I'm simply honoring that request." "But we closed today," he said, his voice rising. "We've already given notice on our apartment. Our stuff is in boxes. You can't do this to us." "I'm not doing anything to you," I replied. "I'm doing exactly what you asked me to do. You said Brenda doesn't feel safe around me, so I removed myself from your mortgage. Problem solved." "Janet, please," he said, and I could hear desperation creeping into his voice. "I know things got out of hand, but we can work this out. We need this house." You should have thought about that before you chose to believe your fiancé's lies over your sister's truth, I said. Before you told your injured sister to stay away instead of making sure she was okay. Look, maybe Brenda exaggerated what happened, he said quickly. Maybe you both got carried away and things escalated. Can't we just put this behind us? Exaggerated? I said, feeling my anger rise. Dennis. She gave me a concussion. She dislocated my shoulder. She left me bleeding on the floor and ran away. That's not an exaggeration, that's a felony assault. Okay, he said. Maybe she was wrong to get physical. But Janet, you can't destroy our future over one fight. We can get counseling or mediation, or whatever you think we need. The time for mediation was before your fiancé assaulted me, I said. And definitely before you told me I was imagining things, and demanded I drop the charges against her. I was trying to protect Brenda, he said weakly. And I was trying to protect myself, I replied. Something you should have been doing as my brother. There was a long silence. When Dennis spoke again, his voice was small and defeated. What do you want me to do? Tell me how to fix this. There's nothing you can do, I said. You made your choice when you believed her lies over my truth. You made your choice when you told your sister to stay away after she was assaulted. You made your choice when you prioritized your abusive fiancé's feelings over your injured sister's well-being. She's not abusive, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice anymore. Dennis? She manipulated you into choosing her over your own family, I said. She isolated you from the one person who's always had your back. She physically attacked someone and then convinced you that the victim was the real problem. If that's not abuse, what is? Another long silence. So that's it? He asked finally. You're just going to cut us off completely? You cut me off, I reminded him. I'm just making it official. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet house and waited to feel guilty or sad or regretful. But mostly, I felt relieved. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about Brenda's next tantrum or Dennis's next request for me to enable her behavior. I was free from their drama and manipulation. That afternoon, Detective Santos called with an update. We arrested Brenda Morrison this morning, she said. She's been charged with aggravated assault and is being held on $10,000 bail. What happens now? I asked. The district attorney will review the case and decide whether to offer a plea deal or take it to trial, she explained. Given the clear evidence and the severity of your injuries, I expect they'll prosecute fully. That evening, Dennis called again. This time he sounded different, quieter, more thoughtful. Janet, I've been thinking about what you said, he began. And I've been watching Brenda's reaction to all this. She's not handling it well. What do you mean? I asked. She's angry all the time now, he said. She's blaming everyone but herself for what happened. She says the police are corrupt, the legal system is biased against women, you're vindictive and manipulative. She hasn't once said she's sorry for hurting you. I didn't respond. I wanted Dennis to work through this himself. And when the mortgage got canceled, he continued, she completely lost it. She threw things, screamed at me for hours, said it was all my fault for having a crazy sister. She's been saying we should sue you for sabotaging our loan. Dennis, I said quietly. Does any of that sound like someone who's sorry for what she did? No, he said after a long pause. No, it doesn't. And does it sound like someone who's capable of taking responsibility for her actions? No, he said again, even quieter this time. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said. But I can't pretend that what happened was okay. And I can't put myself at risk again by staying involved in your lives while Brenda is in them. I understand, he said. I think I'm finally starting to understand a lot of things. But understanding and action are two different things. Over the next few weeks, Dennis continued trying to salvage his relationship with Brenda, even as the legal case against her moved forward. He paid her bail, hired her a lawyer, and stood by her as she maintained her innocence and painted me as the villain in the story. It wasn't until the court proceedings began that Dennis finally saw the truth he'd been avoiding. 3 months after the assault, Brenda's case went to trial. The district attorney, James Morrison, had offered her a plea deal for a reduced charge, but Brenda rejected it on the advice of her attorney. She wanted to fight the charges completely, still maintaining that she'd acted in self-defense against my attack. I was nervous about testifying, but Detective Santos and the prosecutor prepared me well. The physical evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of my injuries, medical records documenting the concussion and dislocated shoulder, the stone with my blood on it, and the 911 recording where I could be heard calling for help while clearly injured. The trial lasted 3 days. Brenda's attorney tried to paint me as a controlling, manipulative woman who had provoked the confrontation, and then exaggerated my injuries to punish Brenda for standing up to me. But the evidence told a different story. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Williams, who explained that my injuries were consistent with being struck by a blunt object and then kicked while down. The pattern of bruising on my ribs showed multiple impacts from above, which would be impossible if I'd simply fallen during a struggle. Dennis attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back of the courtroom. I could see him watching as witness after witness described what had really happened that day, and I watched his face change as the reality sank in. His fiancée had violently assaulted his sister and then lied about it, manipulating him into choosing her side over his family. When the prosecutor played the 911 recording, I saw Dennis put his head in his hands. You could hear my voice, weak and hurt, telling the dispatcher that I'd been assaulted. You could hear the pain and confusion as I tried to explain what had happened. There was no anger in my voice, no vindictiveness, just an injured woman asking for help. Brenda took the stand in her own defense, which turned out to be a mistake. Under cross-examination, she became hostile and defensive, exactly the way she'd behaved during our mortgage meetings. When the prosecutor asked her to explain the physical evidence, she claimed I must have injured myself to frame her. You're suggesting that Ms. Patterson gave herself a concussion and dislocated her own shoulder? The prosecutor asked. I don't know how she got hurt, Brenda said defiantly. But I never hit her with anything. What about the stone found at the scene with Ms. Patterson's blood on it? I don't know anything about any stone, she insisted. But the prosecutor had saved the best for last. The house had a security system that the previous owners had installed but never mentioned to the real estate agent. It wasn't active, but it had a camera at the front door that captured audio from inside the house. The recording was muffled and unclear, but you could hear shouting, then the sound of something hitting the wall, then my voice calling 911. More importantly, you could hear Brenda's voice clearly saying, "You ruined everything," as she was apparently kicking me. The audio expert testified that the voice patterns matched Brenda's speech samples. When that recording was played, I saw Dennis stand up abruptly and leave the courtroom. He didn't come back for the rest of the trial. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Brenda guilty of aggravated assault. The judge sentenced her to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management classes, and restitution for my medical expenses. As I left the courthouse after the sentencing, I found Dennis waiting by my car. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he'd lost weight. "Janet," he said as I approached. "Can we talk?" I stopped a few feet away from him, keeping some distance. "What do you want to say?" "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything. For not believing you, for choosing Brenda over you, for letting her manipulate me into thinking you were the problem. I was an idiot, and I nearly lost the most important person in my life." I looked at my little brother, the man I'd raised and supported and loved unconditionally, and felt a mix of sadness and exhaustion. "Dennis, I'm glad you finally see the truth, but I don't know if sorry is enough." "What can I do?" he asked desperately. "Tell me how to fix this. Tell me how to make it right." "You can't," I said simply. "When I was lying in that hospital bed with a concussion, calling you for support, you chose to believe her lies over my truth. When I needed my brother most, you abandoned me. That's not something you can just apologize for." "But we're family," he said. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "Family is supposed to mean that you have each other's backs," I replied. "Family is supposed to mean that you protect each other, not choose abusive partners over blood relatives. You showed me what family means to you, Dennis, and it doesn't include me." I was confused, he said. "She was so convincing, and I thought I loved her." "You weren't confused when you told me to stay away," I said. "You weren't confused when you pressured me to drop charges against the woman who gave me a concussion. You made clear, conscious choices, and those choices showed me where your priorities were." "My priorities were wrong," he admitted. "I see that now. She's been awful since the arrest. She blames everyone but herself, just like you said. She's angry and bitter and mean. I finally saw what you were trying to tell me." "I'm glad you finally see who she really is," I said. "But Dennis, the damage is done. You can't unring this bell." I got in my car and drove away, leaving my brother standing alone in the courthouse parking lot. As I watched him disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt sad, but also strangely peaceful. I'd spent so many years protecting Dennis, supporting him, sacrificing for him. But I'd finally learned that you can't love someone into treating you well. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let people face the consequences of their choices. 9 months have passed since that day at the courthouse, and my life has found a new rhythm. The physical injuries from Brenda's assault healed completely, though I still get headaches when it rains. The emotional wounds took longer to mend, but I've worked through them with a wonderful therapist who helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for Dennis's choices or their consequences. My real estate business has thrived without the constant drama and stress of Brenda's interference. I've closed more deals this year than any previous year, and several clients have specifically commented on how calm and focused I seem. It turns out that removing toxic people from your life really does improve your professional performance. I've also reconnected with friends I'd neglected while trying to manage Dennis and Brenda's problems. My college roommate Sarah and I have started taking weekend trips together, exploring Colorado's beautiful mountain towns and hiking trails. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed having relationships that were based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and crisis management. Dennis has tried to contact me several times over the months. He sends text messages on my birthday, holidays, and the anniversary of our parents' death. They're always apologetic and hopeful, asking if we can meet for coffee or dinner to talk, but I haven't responded to any of them. I'm not trying to punish him, but I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can forgive Dennis for his betrayal without putting myself back in a position where he can hurt me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Dennis and Brenda broke up about 2 months after the trial. Apparently, the stress of the legal case, losing the house, and the financial burden of her lawyer fees finally exposed the cracks in their relationship that had been there all along. Dennis moved back into a small apartment across town and is working to rebuild his finances after the expensive lesson in choosing the wrong partner. Brenda left Denver entirely, according to what I heard. She moved back to her hometown in Kansas, claiming that Colorado had too many bad memories. I hope she's getting the help she needs with her anger issues, but I'm grateful that she's no longer my problem to worry about. The most important thing I've learned from this experience is the difference between being loving and being enabling. For years, I thought that being a good sister meant always supporting Dennis, always being there to bail him out, always putting his needs ahead of my own. But real love sometimes means setting boundaries and letting people face the natural consequences of their decisions. I used to feel guilty about withdrawing the mortgage guarantee, wondering if I'd been too harsh or vindictive. But my therapist helped me see that I was simply protecting myself from someone who had proven they couldn't be trusted with my financial security. If Dennis had chosen to stand by me after the assault, if he had supported me through the legal process, if he had shown any genuine remorse for his fiancée's actions, the outcome might have been different. But he chose Brenda's lies over my truth, and that choice had consequences. The hardest part hasn't been losing Dennis, though that does hurt. The hardest part has been accepting that the brother I thought I knew, the man I'd raised and supported and loved unconditionally, maybe never really existed. Maybe he'd always been someone who would choose his own comfort over doing the right thing. Maybe I'd just never been in a situation before where that weakness was tested. But I've also discovered strength in myself that I didn't know I had. I survived a violent assault and fought back through the legal system. I stood up for myself when my own family abandoned me. I protected my financial security and professional reputation from people who would have destroyed both. I learned to prioritize my own well-being instead of constantly sacrificing for others. There are days when I miss having a family, when I wish things could have been different. But mostly, I feel free. Free from drama and manipulation and constant crisis. Free from enabling someone else's poor choices. Free to build relationships with people who treat me with respect and kindness. I've started dating again, something I'd put on hold while dealing with Dennis and Brenda's problems. I'm taking it slow, but I've met someone wonderful through my hiking group. His name is Robert, and he's a teacher who loves the outdoors as much as I do. What I appreciate most about him is how he handles conflict. When we disagree about something, we talk it through calmly and respectfully. He doesn't manipulate or blame or make me responsible for his emotions. It's refreshing to be with someone who takes responsibility for his own actions and treats me as an equal partner. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things ended with Dennis, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is complicated. I regret that Dennis chose an abusive partner over his family. I regret that he was willing to believe lies about his sister rather than face uncomfortable truths about his fiancée. I regret that our parents aren't here to see how their children turned out. But I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret refusing to enable Brenda's abuse or Dennis's willingness to look the other way. I don't regret insisting on accountability and consequences for actions. And I don't regret learning that I'm strong enough to stand alone, rather than accept mistreatment from people who are supposed to love me. The experience taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. Family is about people who show up for you when life gets difficult, who believe in you when others doubt, who protect you when you're vulnerable. By that definition, Dennis stopped being family the moment he chose to protect his abuser instead of his victim. Real family would have rushed to the hospital when I called from my bed with a concussion. Real family would have been furious that someone had hurt me, not defensive of the person who did it. Real family would have supported me through the legal process, instead of pressuring me to let my attacker off the hook. I've built a new kind of family now, made up of friends who've proven their loyalty and love through actions, not just words. Sarah, who drove 3 hours to stay with me the first week after the assault. My neighbor Margaret, who brought me meals and picked up my prescriptions when I was too dizzy to drive. My colleague Tom, who covered my client meetings without being asked, and never made me feel guilty about the inconvenience. These are the people who showed me what real love looks like. Love that doesn't require you to sacrifice your well-being or ignore your own needs. Love that doesn't ask you to accept abuse or make excuses for inexcusable behavior. Love that celebrates your strength instead of exploiting your loyalty. As I sit here in my peaceful home, surrounded by plants I've had time to nurture, and books I've finally had space to read, I realized that losing Dennis was actually a gift. It forced me to examine what I was willing to accept in the name of family loyalty, and it taught me that some relationships are too toxic to maintain, even when they share your DNA. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm stronger, wiser, and much more selective about who I allow into my inner circle. I've learned that being alone is better than being with people who don't value or respect you. I've discovered that you can love someone and still refuse to let them hurt you. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let people face the results of their choices, even when those people are family. Dennis chose Brenda over me. Lies over truth. Enabling over accountability. Those choices had consequences that changed both our lives forever. I hope someday Dennis learns from this experience and becomes the kind of man who would stand up for his family instead of abandoning them. But that's his journey to take, not mine to manage. My job now is to protect the peace I've built and continue growing into the person I was meant to be. And you know what? For the first time in my adult life, I'm excited about my future. I'm excited about the adventures I'll have with Robert, the business goals I'll achieve, the friendships I'll deepen. I'm excited about a life built on mutual respect and genuine love, rather than obligation and crisis management. That's not something I could have said when I was constantly worried about Dennis's next poor decision or Brenda's next tantrum. Freedom, it turns out, is worth more than family loyalty when that loyalty is one-sided and destructive. I want to ask all of you watching this, have you ever had to make a choice between protecting yourself and maintaining a toxic relationship? Have you ever had family members who expected you to accept mistreatment in the name of keeping peace? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in making these difficult decisions. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family, relationships, and finding the strength to choose yourself when others won't choose you. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect yourself, even from family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your well-being matters. You deserve relationships built on respect, trust, and genuine love. Don't let anyone convince you to accept less, no matter how closely related you are. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away and build a better life for yourself. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember that you're stronger than you think.